Hi, I'm Amy Wilkins, leadership coach, former media exec, and your host of Thriving in the Messy Middle. This is a space for women leaders navigating those in between seasons, the moments when things feel uncertain, stretched, or messy, and you're trying to find your footing without losing yourself. Some episodes are conversations with remarkable women leaders sharing the lessons they've learned along the way. And other times, it's just you and me, slowing things down and naming what's really going on. Think of this as a place to reset, reflect, and reconnect with what matters most. Because thriving isn't about having it all figured out. It's about learning how to grow, lead, and move forward, even when things feel messy. Today's messy middle moment is inspired by my conversation with Serena Diamond. So there's a moment in leadership that doesn't get talked about enough. And it's not when you're exhausted, and it's not when you're frustrated, and it's not even when things feel misaligned. It's the moment when you realize you're no longer willing to build a guiding coalition inside the organization you work for. Because that willingness actually says something very specific. It says something about whether you still believe in the place you're leading from. Now, when I say guiding coalition, I want to be clear about what I mean. I'm not talking about a formal task force or a leadership committee. A guiding coalition is an internal body of individuals chosen by you. It's a small, intentional group of peers across functions, levels, or disciplines who see the organization from different angles. They care about the system, and they are willing to think and move together. These aren't people in the same role as you necessarily, and they're not your direct reports, and they're not there to simply agree with you. A guiding coalition exists to help leaders influence change from within. It's how ideas travel and silos loosen, and it's how culture actually shifts. So when leaders build guiding coalitions internally, what they're really saying is, I'm invested enough to influence this, or I believe that this culture is worth shaping, and I want this organization to succeed and not just survive. And here's the part we don't always say out loud. When we stop being willing to do that, it's often a signal. Years ago, I was working for a company where something felt off. And I was doing my job, but underneath it, I was increasingly discontent. And one day I was venting with a colleague and, just sharing what wasn't working and how out of sorts I felt in my role. And she said something very reasonable. She said, well, why don't you schedule breakfast with so and so, one of the company leaders, and talk it through? And I didn't just hesitate, I had a physical reaction. My body actually recoiled. And not because the suggestion was wrong, and not because the leader was inaccessible, but because in that moment, I realized something uncomfortable and very clear. I didn't want to build a guiding coalition in that company. I wasn't interested in investing the energy required to influence from within. And I didn't believe alignment was even possible. And I knew that trying to push change there would ultimately fail. And not just for me, but for my team. That reaction told me more than any spreadsheet or pro and con list ever could. It told me I was done. And here's why that matters in the messy middle. So many leaders stay stuck because they confuse frustration with misalignment. Frustration says, this is hard, but I care. Misalignment says, I no longer believe my effort here will matter. And one of the clearest ways to tell the difference is to ask yourself this: am I still willing to build a guiding coalition inside this organization? Because building one takes energy. It requires trust and patience, and it also requires belief. And when that willingness disappears, it's not a character flaw. It's just data. And now let me pause here for a moment, because choosing to stay deserves its own reframing. Choosing to stay is not settling, it's a decision. If you're staying and you're willing to build a guiding coalition where you are, that tells me something really important. It tells me that you still see possibility. It tells me that you believe your voice matters. And it tells me you're invested enough to help shape what's next. Staying doesn't mean everything is aligned. It means the misalignment feels workable. It means the effort still feels meaningful. And in those moments, building a guiding coalition isn't just a strategy, it's an act of leadership. It's saying, I'm not opting out, I'm not going quiet, I'm choosing to influence from within. And that choice takes courage because shaping culture from the inside is slow, relational, and it's often invisible work. But it's also how real change happens. So here's your messy middle reflection question today. If you're honest with yourself, are you still willing to build a guiding coalition where you are? If the answer is yes, embrace the challenges, find those peers, cross the silos, have those breakfasts, shape the culture. And if the answer is no, don't ignore the signal, because sometimes the messy middle isn't asking you to try harder. It's asking you to be honest with yourself. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope something you heard gave you a little clarity, or maybe just a sense that you're not alone in this season. The messy middle isn't something we pass through once. It shows up again and again, and each time we meet it with a bit more awareness, a bit more choice, and a lot more self-trust. If this episode resonated, follow the show so you don't miss what's next. And if someone came to mind while listening, share it with them. That's how this community grows. You'll find links and resources in the show notes and more ways that we can work together at chooseaw.com. And I'll leave you with this reminder. You are the most worthwhile project you will ever work on. So until next time, keep thriving, even in the messy middle.